Welcome to The Incredible Messenger, a blend of real-world stories, expert insights, and proven strategies that keep our families, communities, and cities safe and healthy. Moving beyond rhetoric and politics to practical solutions and community safety, here's your host, Jonathan McMillan.
All right, y'all. Thank you for coming back for another episode of the Incredible Messenger podcast. I am excited to hit the record button again because this is essentially season 2. This is my first guest from the next iteration of the show. And I'm really excited to have this person on. You already know this show is not surface level. I seek out people who are legitimately doing the work in gun violence prevention, or like me, firearm related harm. And I will revamp the show a little bit this year or this season. Last year, I was just getting my feet wet. I was trying to figure this out. I think that what you'll hear this season will be improvement on what was already a really dope and fun project. So I hope you like it. I'm sure that you're going to like my next guest, because this show is about real people doing real work and here to tell the truth. A little background, my guest today, I first met her, I want to say 2020. It was during the pandemic, and she was just, I was asked to participate in a virtual convening for Cities United. Cities United is an organization you've heard about many times on the show, not by accident, because they're doing great work. Some of the great work they were doing was a convening, and as a part of that annual convening, they have youth-centered conversations and breakout groups. I was asked to support the young people that year, and that's where I was introduced to our next guest, Rachel. She is a ray of sunshine. She is always so upbeat, so positive, so energetic, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. On top of being all those dope things, she's also a youth worker. She's a strategist. She is a systems changer. She's not just a young person who has been tokenized in these spaces. She has made sure that when she shows up in these spaces, she's showing to fight and make sure that young people aren't just heard, but they're leading. She's worked with city workers, national nonprofits, community organizations, and she does it all. So anyway, that's who Rachel is, at least from my experience. I am going to bring her on now. Rachel, thank you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for that introduction.
Oh, you're
Very kind of you. I'm excited to be here and talk about the youth and how folks can get unplugged in.
all right. Well, let's get into it. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Cool.
It's your story to tell, so feel free to share whatever you want. Go ahead. What brought you into the work?
That's a good question. And you know what? I'm young. I'm only 31. I haven't lived that much life. So what got me into the work is, as a college student, I started volunteering with an organization in the neighborhood closest to my university. So I was going to a PWI, private school. There were not a lot of us there, and just down the street, this is true in cities across America, I now know, right? Just down the street is the most poverty-stricken neighborhood in the city, predominantly Black, historically Black, all the things, right? I imagine we're going to talk about some root causes of violence today. All of those things were prevalent in this neighborhood. I started volunteering because I just wanted to be around people that looked like me. I was like, I don't care for kids. I just want to be around people that look like me. It was a profound, life-changing experience for me, not because I had any crazy impact on these young people, right? But I got a firsthand experience of mentoring young people that were facing systemic challenges that were far beyond behavioral modification, right? I would camp out in in-school suspension to connect with young people because I was like, yeah, give me your worst, right? And I was so struck by that, I was surrounded by kids that would self-refer to themselves as bad. I'm a bad kid. I'm a bad kid. And that hurt my heart. I was like, you're not bad. You're a good kid in a bad situation. Good kids make the most of whatever options they have, and you haven't had good options. So I think that was where my journey as a youth worker started, and kind of where my heart broke, that's what guides our work as we get to different levels and stages and start working in the system side of things first, right? In whatever capacity that happens, whether it's a family member, losing a loved one, right? That's the start of a lot of people's journey in this work. And so the start of my journey was I was volunteering at the site. I had a young person who came to club after school. He was sick. He had been in the nurse's office all day. I asked him, why didn't you go home? He's like, my mom's been in line at the Salvation Army all day so that we have somewhere to sleep tonight. And I hate to start on such a heavy note, but this young person, like, he didn't graduate from high school. And then he ended up passing away when he was 20 years old. And it was so evident to me in having been in a relationship with and then kind of losing touch and then learning about his passing, like over the course of those, gosh, I imagine it was like less than 8 years, right? Every single system in our community failed this young person, right? Housing failed him, education failed him, having access to mental health care failed him, right? And so I think that's when it cemented for me that we got to do something about these systems, right? Because I worked with 20 different kids over the 5-year period of doing direct service work before I started training other youth workers. And of those 20, it's hard for me to like have any really success stories, quote unquote, right? Like I maybe have one or two of those young people that have gone on to live successful lives and haven't been impacted by the various systems that failed that one young person. So I say all that to say that's what led me into doing systems level change. And Cities United was the first organization I met that really exposed me to what we call root causes of violence. And I had never heard anybody frame it in that way and start to break down all of those different elements that contribute to a community where violence is the first or only option.
Thank you for sharing that. And first off, I'm glad you started with the heavy stuff because that's what matters, right? This work is heavy and a lot of people don't recognize just how heavy the work is unless you're doing the work and you've experienced that. Most people think about like working with young people is what's that movie with Sandra Bullock, The Blind Side, or all of those movies. I've never seen it, by the way, because there's a dozen of them like that.
There's a whole book called The White Savior Complex.
Well, the white savior I went to school are black and brown people too. Like the Hollywood version of the story is you show up and you're appointed with this cape and it's really easy.
For sure.
I could go out. That's another episode, right? Okay, a couple of questions. One, you're from Washington, right?
Yeah. I'm from Washington State, Tacoma to be specific, not Seattle.
So it makes a lot. Tacoma, Washington.
That's what I'm talking about. See, you know something.
A little bit. So is that where you were going to school and you experienced that dynamic?
Yeah. I was going to school in Tacoma at a private liberal arts school, and I was working with young people in a neighborhood called Hilltop, historically Black neighborhood. At the time, I mean, all of the different things that we talk about as being those root causes that set a community up for deterioration were prevalent, like drug trafficking, sex trafficking was a big piece. There was one grocery store, never had fresh produce, right? Like just all of these different components. And it's currently experiencing a good deal of gentrification. Unfortunately, people are being pushed out. But again, we see this in cities across America, right? A historically Black neighborhood or a neighborhood where poverty was really centralized at one point in, between the like 80s and early 2000s is now being built up and developed and pushing folks that are from that neighborhood out. And the reason that becomes important for folks that are doing the work that we're doing is because once you start losing people, they get spread out. They're not getting spread out into one area. They're getting spread out into all kinds of places. And so then as frontline workers, it becomes harder to find your folks, right? And also violence starts traveling into communities or neighborhoods or unincorporated parts of the county that don't have the resources to navigate what's popping off, right? So yeah, that's a little bit about the neighborhood I come from.
You highlighted something when we talk about violence in general, right? Many people don't understand what we mean when it's said a public health issue. Gun violence in particular, but violence in general is a preventable social disease. Once you've been impacted, once you've been infected, like a common cold virus, right? Once you've been infected, it's super easy to pass that on to someone else. And if you don't control the spread of it, then it spreads out to a point where it exponentially, right? It can exponentially spread. So as you describe it, while gentrification is technically correct, it's the displacement of,
100%.
right?
100%.
It's the
Yes.
displacement of those people in those communities. And when you displace them with no rhyme, reason, or regard where they end up,
Yep.
then you're potentially spreading the virus of violence. And I want to be very clear, not the people. It's the root causes and risk factors that they carry with them, right?
Right. It's the reaction to a lack of investment, right?
Right.
We're seeing in communities across America, investment comes, and the result of that investment is the community is fabulous and wonderful, but the folks that have been there don't get to experience because they're priced
Yes.
out.
Yes.
And so it's not the people, it's a lack of investment because then they're having to move to areas that are also disinvested in, right? It's not a new thing. It's the same thing happening over and over again.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you're spot on.
Absolutely. You said something else, and I want to circle back to it. How did you phrase it? Oh, the young man who unfortunately passed on, and you said other young people would self-identify as being bad, right? And you would challenge that and say, you're not bad, you just have bad options. I would love to explore that a little bit more because so many times in these spaces, when they say like the kids who are high-risk kids or at-risk kids or at-risk communities, right? Or high risk and all of that. Well, it's not the person or the place, it's the behavior or the conditions, right? When you're working with young people who see themselves as bad or hopeless or without options, how do you work with young people to help them change that paradigm and their perspective? What does that work look like?
Yeah, I mean, and if there are any youth workers listening, they know that it is the number one thing that you need with a young person, especially in whatever space that they're in, but especially if they're in a place of hopelessness or feeling like they self-identify as, bad or any other of those negative kind of stereotypes. Time. Time is huge. Like you have to build trust over time. You have to build relationship over time. Like that's absolutely number one. If I was talking to somebody who was volunteering for the first time and they were in over their head and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just know that we need to change something. So I'm going to try. Time. You don't have to have the right shoes. They used to make fun of my shoes so much. I came from the suburbs, Jonathan. So I didn't know what was going on. I came in with some Keds. They were like, what are that was when what are those was a thing. Like they used to roast the mess out of me, right? And you know what? Like none of that mattered, right? They really wanted to see, is she gonna stay and is she gonna show up continuously, right? So like time is a big piece. So while you're skill building to work with certain populations of young people, give yourself time, just stick it out. It's hard, but just stick it out. I think is like number one. And then number two for me was like, and this was something that was kind of innately in me because of how I was raised, but like seeing value in people just off rip, right? I remember I was at a conference one time and somebody asked the room, when you drive down the street and there's a group of young people, middle schoolers, high schoolers huddled on a street corner, what's your first thought? And for some folks in the room, their first thought was, oh, they're up to no good. They're doing something bad. They're this, they're that. It assigned so many stereotypes to them. Like they're loitering, they're doing this, right. And if that's your initial impression of young people, then you do not see the value in them and you do not see the good in them. You can't work with them, period. I think that's a big piece of just immediately seeing the value and what young people bring to the table. And that's part of my work now as I help young people access platforms is they might be new to earth, right? If you're an older person, you've been here for a while, right? They might be new to earth, but they're not new to the experiences that they're having in the world, right? I worked with a young person from Denver, our friend Michael, and he used to say, I might be young, but the experiences I have are that of a much older person. And I'm an expert in what I've been through. And that is the absolute truth of every young person you encounter. So if you look at them and see them as gold, you see them for all of the wealth of knowledge and wisdom and experience they've been through, it fundamentally shifts how you show up, right? If you act like the young person in front of you is whoever is important to you, I don't know if that's Barack Obama or Magic Johnson, right? Like, but if you look at a young person and see the value in them at that level, right? Like it changes the way that you show up. It changes the way you give them space. It changes the opportunities that you might refer them to. And that's not a mind trick. That is something I actually believe. Like I meet a young person, I'm like, oh, wow, you're not just full of potential. You're full of what is good right this second. Like, let me get you a mic stat, you know?
I love all of that. And you literally just
Yeah.
gave me chills.
Mm,
Shout out to Michael, wherever you are. My young G, he is such an incredible, bright mind who, unfortunately, the traumas that he's experienced in his life have blinded him to some of the opportunities and the dopeness that's in him right now, because he would have those bright nuggets of, I am an expert. I may have only been here for a few years, but the experiences have made me wise beyond those years. So yeah, thank you for elevating that. I want to ask you, when you started this pathway of saying, okay, these systems are jacked up, the root causes need to be addressed. What was something that you had to unlearn when you walked into that space?
mm.
And how did you go about unlearning that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. At the time, as a youth worker, when I was looking specifically at the work that I was doing, I knew that my young people needed, for example, they were like, a lot of them were failing in school, right? And I would talk to educators and I would talk to other folks that weren't deeply embedded in the work. And I would say, you can't learn without food, right? If you're hungry, you cannot learn. If you're tired and you don't have anywhere safe to sleep and school's the only place you can, then no, you're not going to be able to learn what your catch is in history, right? So basic needs. I was super aware of meeting the basic needs of young people being a key factor in their ability to perform in school, right? I did a lot of learning and unlearning in this phase of my life, right? Because I was a young person too. You know, I'm like 22, 23 at this point. I'm just figuring my life out. But I think one of the fundamental things that I was exposed to, again, on behalf of Cities United, was that there were all of those basic needs that needed to be met. But in addition to that, positioning young people in a community that is supportive covers all those needs and then some. And that meant that everybody had a part to play. So it wasn't just youth workers that needed to be involved in the conversation. It was youth workers, folks working in hospitals, doctors, lawyers, and folks involved in the legal system, juvenile justice folks. It's a really wide swath of folks that have to be plugged into what's going on. I had a young person who was being sex trafficked, a young girl. She got pregnant when she was 12 years old. It was an insane situation for a 22-year-old to be navigating. Walking with her through pregnancy and interacting with health professionals who were unaware, she got pregnant 2 blocks away from this hospital. And they were completely unaware of how to approach working with her in a trauma-informed way and offering her wraparound care that could meet the needs that she was showing us with, and then extend that to the ecosystem of support that needed to be there for her. I learned and unlearned a couple of things. Number one, everybody has a part to play. And number two, our ecosystem has to be really well connected. So thank you for doing this podcast. That's a big piece of that, is saying that we all need to know what's going on and be able to communicate around that. And I'll shout out the city of Newark, because they have a really incredible ecosystem of partners that work so well together. If a shooting takes place, immediately the next morning, all of the different players are at the table and those conversations are being had. And so nobody falls through the gaps.
I'm happy to get a sweater because you keep giving me chills over here. That is so dope. Like, just recognizing, especially your last point about how that ecosystem has to be connected, and that ecosystem has to be functional. Honestly, it's a system of services. It's a system of care. It's a system of relationships, right? Everybody is interconnected. I would say even at the center of that, at the core center of that is the young person, right? Around that young person is what I say is the number one protective factor in the world, of caring, trusted adult consistently in a young person's life. Right. Or an old person's
and you
life,
can
for that
consider
matter.
that our messengers aren't just messengers, they're navigators too.
Exactly. And they're navigating them to other caring, trusted adults who will be consistently in their lives. And that's how you build the ecosystem, the community, resilience, all of those things that people need, not just survive, but to thrive. So thank you for hitting on that.
Yeah.
I'm super curious. Again, imagining that the person listening to this is a young person is stepping into this world, into this field. And maybe it's not even gun violence prevention. They're stepping into service. They're stepping into leadership in some type of way. Because you have navigated so much in the years that you've been doing this at such a high level, I'm curious, where's a moment where you chose to say what needed to be said, even though it might have cost you an opportunity or a relationship?
Yeah, it has happened to me a couple of times. One thing you gotta know about me, Jonathan, is that my integrity is, like, the most important thing to me. I'll leave a lot on the table for my integrity, and there's a lot I won't do to protect it, and so that means, losing high-profile relationships, that means losing money, and so what I'm about to share, folks need to keep that in mind. If that's not you, if you kinda move a little bit different, that's cool, but, my decision making is really fundamentally rooted in holding true to my integrity. And when I was in school, in undergrad, I went again, like I mentioned, was going to um, predominantly white institution, and it was around the time that they decided not to charge the police that shot and killed Michael Brown. And if you recall, during that time, it was in 2015, end of 2015, there were universities reacting across the United States. And many, many folks were bringing demands um, to their president's offices and boards of trustees. And my school was no exception. And they needed somebody who was going to facilitate the school-wide walkout. And so alongside several other organizations on campus. I was the president of the Black Student Union at the time, and we walked out with over 500 students, but also staff and faculty that came out as well. And we had 10 demands. And at this time, you should know that it's a small school, and I was a big fish in a small pond. And so I was plugged into a lot of spaces, and I was working as the student assistant to the office of the president at the time. So me and the president were in communication on a regular basis. And so in that process, yeah, the energy was not positive coming from the administration. They were not excited to have people on their doorstep talking about all the things that were wrong. And a lot of people, think about protests and taking up space as being a waste of time. Like I've heard other Black folks say that, right? Like that it's just like kind of an exercise to like get your emotions out. But I find it to be a really strategic resource. And it was really strategic for us to put pressure to engage in a meeting. And just so it's clear, we had gone through many of the steps that needed to be gone through in order to raise some of these issues. There were a lot of things that were fundamentally and systemically wrong in the space. And so the night before this walkout happened, I kind of had like a moment of crises where I was like, dang, am I really about to do this? Because I knew what was on the line. I knew I was like, I might lose my job in the president's office. For sure, I'm not getting letters of recommendation from him or any of the folks in the administration when I leave. I was a senior at this point. I also was just like going through it as a normal college student, right? Like, I don't have a lot of funds. I don't have a lot of resources. I don't have a lot of time. I wasn't sleeping leading up to this, right? Like, you give up a lot in the process of doing what's right. And I called my dad, and my dad at the time was just like, he worked for the university, so he was stressed about losing his job when I was doing this. Yeah. And so he wasn't really pumped about me doing it either. And I was like, Dad, I think it's the right thing to do, but I'm not sure. I'm scared. And he said, if it's about loving people, then you got to do it. So to hear that from somebody who was equally scared and had been working there for a minute, right? Like that meant a lot to me. And so, yeah, we did that. And yeah, I lost those relationships. I didn't lose my job, which was good. They let me stay, but it was very awkward for the last like 6 months of the semester. And truthfully, that pressure applied did something, right? One of our demands was to get new facilities for all of the clubs and organizations on campus that were serving Black and brown folks. That happened within a year. We wanted African American studies to become a major, not just a minor. It became a major within a year. They've since hired upwards of 5 new Black staff and faculty. So yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect place. Obviously, they still have a lot of growth and work to do, but it was absolutely worth doing. And I can tell you, I went through like a real depression afterwards. Like it was really hard. Like it was not easy. It wasn't like we did that and then everything was smooth sailing. Like it was a really, really hard time. Um, but I wouldn't do it different at all. It was the right thing.
Shout out to that answer.
Sorry, it was a little
No,
long.
no. Like that is so dope. That answer and that story that you shared. Is your dad a Black man?
He is.
Okay. So
Yeah.
shout out to that story.
Yeah.
And just as a moment of privilege, shout out to Black dads, right? You
Yeah.
know, we get a bit,
There's a really good article about us out there somewhere.
yeah, we get a bad rap sometimes. And like, that's the part that really, all of it was the dope story. That part just touched my heart.
For sure.
Staying in that track, I think I know the answer based off of what you just
Well, I
said.
hope I get it right.
What did it take for you to trust your own voice? Especially
Ooh.
when systems made you feel like you had to prove yourself to belong as a Black person, as a Black woman. What did it take for you to trust your own voice in this space?
I think it was a variety of things. And I think I'm still learning how to, if I'm honest,
Yeah.
right? And trusting yourself when you've been gaslit for a long time is hard. It takes some undoing, right? I use this example as a young person, like a little tiny person, right? You're just developing your idea of the world. And you ask an adult, why is X this way? And they tell you a story about how it is. And then you get older and you're like, that shit wasn't true. You know what I mean? And that's a really light example, but then you have to train yourself to be like, okay, what is true? And kind of restore a trust that like, oh, I kind of knew that wasn't right at the time, but I decided to believe the person in front of me instead of believe in myself. That's the journey I'm on right now. When I was in my early 20s and I was figuring out my voice a little bit, I didn't know so much and trust so much in myself. I trusted in what I believed was right, because I could feel the difference between what was right and what was wrong. And I had a lot of people that believed in me. And so I was like, okay, I might not believe that I'm perfect or great or bring all these good things to the table, but you do. And so I can kind of draw on that to get me where I need to go. And that's part of the journey, right? Is like you got to draw on what you can until you get where you need to go. If I could have learned something sooner, it would have been to trust your instincts. They're usually right.
Great answer again. And unbeknownst to you, you literally answered the next question I have for you.
Oh,
The question was, what's a lie that you were told about leadership that you had to outgrow to get here?
Can I answer it anyways?
Yeah.
Yeah, that you always have to have the answers and that you always have to stay strong. Because leading from my weakest points and telling the truth about it has been the most powerful thing I ever did. Saying, I can't make the meeting today because I'm having a mental moment and I need to collect myself was so much more powerful than me trying to pretend like I wasn't going through it.
So I'm glad I did ask that question. How do you balance being authentic to yourself and transparent to others in that space?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's something that I've really struggled with and had to figure out. I think telling the truth has been kind of my motto. How you tell the truth is another conversation, but telling the truth is the first piece. So for me, I was doing so much in my 20s, just overcommitted. I was running to things, tired all the time. The way that I was investing in people was draining me. Like I was pouring out of an empty cup and I wasn't honest about what I needed because I felt like, and folks that are in the work will get this, I got a triage, right? The most important thing is I need to make sure that this girl doesn't go back to her pimp. Or the most important thing is that I need to make sure that young person never touches a gun or doesn't have time to spend with so-and-so and, expose them to certain things, right? And the truth of the matter is we cannot lead from a place of being empty. So if we are not well nourished and cared for and then pour out of that, we're not really doing anybody a service, right? Like we're using a squirt gun on a fire when we really need a fire hose. I say all that to say that we have to invest deeply in ourselves. If that's the truth that you want to be able to tell. Hey, I can't pick you up today because I really need to make sure that I get to the gym and get my workout in, but can we hang out after, right? Like that's so simple, but that's something I couldn't say at 22. I would have skipped the gym and gone to pick the kid up, right?
I'm laughing because you talk about at 22. At 42, I had a challenge with that, right? Like,
Yeah, it's real.
you still want to stay in your pathway, your journey as a leader in this space, as a youth leader in this space. Looking at your resume and my experience with you, I've seen that you show up in spaces really advocating for youth voice in policy spaces. Conversations we've had is making sure that when youth are participating, it's not just, oh, we're going to have a youth input session. What is something that adults still don't get? And when I say adult, I mean the ones who are in positions of power and authority to craft policy, to craft whatever it is that is supposedly supposed to benefit the young people. What is it that adults still don't get about how power should actually be shared with young people?
I used to say this back when I did DEI. I definitely don't do that anymore because people don't actually want to take your suggestions. The thing that I would say to folks is, and this is with any group that has been historically marginalized or is currently being oppressed, you wouldn't like it if you bought a piece of land and you're building a house from scratch and they decided to build the house without you. The builders came, they designed it without you. You didn't get to pick your countertops. You didn't get to decide what the trim was going to be like. And this is your house. It's the same thing with young people. Stop designing things without them. Don't decide that you need to create a community center and not ask them if that's what they want. Because it might be, or it might not be. And they might want something else. The city of Knoxville is a good example. They actually built something called the Change Center, and they built it in collaboration with young people. And when they unveiled it, they described how young people from beginning to end were a part of deciding what this space was going to be. And even before they decided they were going to make a space, they brought young people into the at the table and surveyed them and said, we want to get violence numbers down. We know that violence is happening when people aren't in school or aren't plugged into other things. What can we do? And the young people said, we need somewhere to kick it. And here's what we like to roller skate. And so in this change center, they have a roller rink, right? And it's a place that young people want to be, and they host birthdays there and they do all kinds of stuff. It was a significant part of their violence prevention strategy, but they had to have young people at the table, because if they didn't have young people at the table, they would have just built another run-of-the-mill community center, threw a basketball, and every kid that doesn't play basketball would still be outside, right? Young people are your most valuable asset. And it's crazy. I shouldn't have a job where most of my time is spent saying that to folks that are building resources for young people. But stop creating things without in the room and at the table. And don't just bring them to the table, but give them power, give them influence, and give them the resources that they need to participate and be a fully engaged participant in this creative process.
I'm about to sprain my neck. I'm nodding so hard over here. So again, love that response. A few more questions here.
I don't want to completely derail you.
No, you're good.
I just wanted to quickly highlight, because I know there will be some youth workers listening that are probably like, okay, I don't have the same power that like somebody who's facilitating a city office does, or somebody who's at like a larger nonprofit, like a United Way in my city. I have a small organization, but I want to give my young people a pathway to have more access to power. You named something that is so important for those folks to do, right? Number one, they already are valuing young people, like we talked about earlier. But number two is giving them safe places to fail and practice what it looks like to show up in those spaces. And if you don't know how to do that, like draw on your mentors and other folks in your network to come in and coach. I think they also need somebody who will really be a liaison and champion them once they're in the room and be really protective as well. An example I have of that is when I was partnering with a city, I brought one of the young people that I was working with into the space. And I'm, probably like 25 at the time. He's like 19, but he's working in the schools with middle school students. And I brought him in to talk about, hey, what are you seeing as you're working with middle school students in your role? And in that space, I had a city council person cut him off mid-sentence. This is a young person who is almost selectively mute. Like, it's really hard for him to share and communicate. And they just weren't valuing him in the way that he needed to be valued. And in that moment, what I wish I would have had the capacity to do was to stop the meeting and remove him from the situation because he wasn't being respected as a peer, that would have been the protective thing to do. And it sounds like in your experience with the Council of Young People, you were incredibly protective of what they brought to the space. Like, you didn't allow their ideas to be co-opted. So those are some of the practices that, as a youth worker plugged in directly with young people, that you can be doing as you're the liaison in their pathway to more power and opportunity.
Thank you for highlighting that,
Yeah.
because it is so important. It's not just the system people who do that, right? It's
Sure.
also our community. They mean well by inviting young people into these spaces. But let's be very honest, there's a culture of children need to be seen and not heard. Right? There's a lot of ego in these spaces, right? And so people will do like what you just said, overtalk, cut off young people, not validating their presence, experience, and voices. And so, yes, I am very protective about the young people who I'm bringing in, because I'm trying to be who I needed when I was that age, right? And the last piece I'll add to that is the fastest way to piss me off is try to co-op my young people or validate your project by
For sure.
bringing young people to a space, but not actually engaging them or letting them engage in these spaces.
Yeah, but the ownership comes from a place of just being really deep relationship there, right? Like, when I think about the young folks I work with, I would do pretty much anything for them. That resonates with me. And I think the behavior that you outlined comes back to not valuing young people, right? You tokenize young people when you don't value them and don't see what they can bring to the table. As a young person, I was chronically undervalued, and folks didn't know what I could bring. And then all of a sudden, if they gave me a stage and a mic, and they learned that I know what I'm doing, you know what I mean? And then they're like, oh, you should come do this, come do that. And it's like, if you would have seen value from me from the jump, you could have benefited from how I like to show up. But now that I know how you move, I don't want to move with you more. And young people are very unforgiving, okay? If you pull some of that stuff with them, they will not be checking for you again. You will have missed your opportunity. You need to invite them to show up, number one, get to know them, number two, number three, pay them, okay? And don't invite them to come and be tokenized, because that's a waste of their time, whether they're getting paid or not. They can go get paid somewhere else and have somebody value them.
Right.
You are not the only person that's offering money to them. So don't think that the opportunity is so special. You need them more than they need you.
Absolutely. That's a whole sermon.
That part.
Like, you gotta be thinking, like, I remember there was a guy who reached out and he wanted the young people I was working with to show up at a meeting because the mayor was going to be there. And I said, so they get to meet the mayor. I'm like, dude,
crazy.
They're working with the mayor. And he's like, oh, really? I'm like, see, if you had shown up to any of their meetings that we have on a regular basis that you know about, then yes, you would have known, because I always give the adults opportunity to participate in the meetings with young people. Right. Anyway, that's
listen,
yeah.
I got you.
This has been such a great conversation. What's something that you stopped explaining to people a long time ago? And how has that shaped your leadership?
That's a good phrasing on your part. Excellent interviewing. Oh gosh. One thing I stopped explaining a long time ago. I think I stopped showing up in rooms where I had to explain so much the value of human beings. Now, I don't mind going into a space and coaching folks who have maybe never engaged young people. I realize that's a skill I didn't know it was. It came pretty innately to me and the folks that I came up with in the work, but it's not something that everybody has. So I don't mind sitting in a room and dismantling this notion that young people need to be seen and not heard, or some of these other notions. Because more often than not, the folks that I talk to, when I start to break it down for them, right, I ask the question, who is a young person that has had an impact on your life? And if you ask somebody over 30 that question, they sit there stumped. And that really, I think, triggers for folks their lack of value of young people. I don't mind having that conversation. But if I'm continuously coming into a space where folks are undervaluing young people, people of color, I'm not going to sit there and explain why you should value other human beings. That's a pointless conversation for me. As an independent contractor, as a business owner, I have walked away from a lot of tables where folks didn't have an innate value for human life. That to me is something that I cannot collaborate with. that's kind of a baseline for me, is that you need to be able to value other folks.
That's a dope answer. And I think I'm challenged with the fact that condition
Crazy.
exists at such a large scale nowadays. It may have always been this way. I'm just really concerned, I guess the best way to describe it. We have so many people who don't have an innate value for other people.
Well, and like connection is such a huge part of the work, relationship and connection. And so what you're describing is a fundamental lack of that. You don't want to be in a community where nobody is. Sounds like to
Yes,
me, right?
yes.
Yeah. So in 2020 is when immediately like, every Black person in every place got asked to do DEI work, right? Everybody's having to like lead trainings all of a sudden, and everybody's like anti-racism this, anti-racism that, right? Like, and that was, at the time, like I just was so burnt out because I had been doing that work before it was popular. And so I got really burnt out on constantly having to explain to the layman things that they could Google, valuing equity and inclusion and a diverse workplace. Those are all things that are fundamentally a part of your leadership. Like if those aren't a part of your identity as a leader, you're missing the butt. Like it's been missed. And so where a lot of folks at that time were willing to kind of do the basics with folks, I stopped doing that altogether. I was like, if you want to fundamentally change some things, we could talk about that. If you're ready to shift your mission, your vision statement, let's talk about that. Let's talk about your values. Let's talk about how you onboard folks. Let's look at your exit interviews. When you start digging into that, people don't want to do all that. Yeah, that's an area that I can't really rock with anymore.
Rachel,
You get it, yeah?
boy, do I get it. When I started working for the state, that was my wake up call about everything that you just described. Is when they hired me, they didn't literally hang a banner that says anti-racist organization, but I heard anti-racist organization so many times. Then something happened immediately after I got hired there. Like I think it was the shooting in Buffalo at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not allowed to make a statement about that shooting. And of course, my Black ass went off, right? Like, y'all talk about this
Yeah.
as a anti-racist organization, but your practices, policies, principles, all of these things protect the power. And that literally is what racism is. It's systems that protect power of the privileged.
Mhm.
And yeah, so yep.
Totally. Being in more progressive communities, I think we see that kind of insidious nature a lot more and how it plays out. So yeah, I can definitely resonate.
You just validated something that I've held close to me, that racism, like true racism, is insidious.
Mm.
It's so present, but it's unseen. What most people call racist is really just bigotry. The racism is the systems that protect and allow that bigotry to operate unchecked. True racism is, like you said, insidious.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Couple more questions here. I really do mean a couple more, maybe three.
Okay.
Earlier in the conversation, when we were talking about, well, I think this has been woven through the entire conversation, but you spoke to it more explicitly earlier about your healing journey.
Mhm.
My observation, and I've observed this for many years, is many people move into violence prevention, youth work, to hopefully be who they needed when they were younger, or to sometimes heal the wounds that they haven't, or maybe it's not even healing. You've heard the phrase wounded warriors, right? There's a
Mhm.
lot of people in CVI who are wounded warriors, and they show up in this space and never do the healing that I think is necessary to be effective. And that's a whole different conversation. Where I'm going with this question for you is there a part of your own healing or growth that you had to prioritize before you could lead others well?
The short answer is for sure yes. It's been ongoing. I probably should have prioritized myself and my own healing earlier, but you know better and you do better,
Mhm.
right? And it's a real ongoing process. I thought I could kind of just will myself to heal others, like if I just had enough time and energy, I could do it all. I set myself up on a hamster wheel because here's the thing, like if I could, and I'm going to use the language that kind of plays out in the mind of a youth worker. If I can just save this kid or this person, if I can just remove that barrier, then I'll get to whatever imaginary finish line exists. But truthfully, there's always one more kid. There's always one more hurdle. And we talked about racism being insidious. The systems that are broken for a reason. So they're going to keep pushing out the same problems until they're fixed. And knowing that as a frontline worker, you have to let some go. It is a really hard thing. It's hard for me to even say. It brings me to tears to think about. But if we could fix every system and we could save every kid, we wouldn't be where we are because we have some incredible frontline workers. We have some incredible folks that serve their communities. But if you are trying to save at the cost of your own person, my goodness, you're not going to be doing it for long. That's the truth. And for me, it became a real wake-up call at the end of last year. I was working 40 hours a week for Cities United, in addition to working another 40 hours a week running a business. I'm working like 80 hours a week. And my business is community-based economic development work. So I'm working with people. I'm trying to reverse these systems that have been oppressing our communities, right? Like that's my 24/7. And I decided I needed to take a sabbatical for my business because I couldn't do it. It was paralyzed with anxiety any hour of the day that I wasn't working. And so then I worked more and the results were good. That's the hard part because you could save the kid, right? Like, you know that if you do X, it will equal a B. It is really hard to stop when you know what can be on the other side, right? But I was so exhausted. I truly cannot move forward like this. It's ruining my relationships. I have no personal life. My health is suffering. After that, I found out that I had an organ that was going bad. And I ended up having to have surgery to remove my gallbladder. That experience, I was like, if I hadn't slowed down to just working 40 hours a week instead of 80, if I hadn't slowed down enough to know what my body needed to heal, I don't know what would have happened. The doctors were like, it could have exploded. It could have toxified the rest of your body, right? The finish line for my life was the finish line that I was closest to at this point because I hadn't taken care of myself. Healing myself over the last 12 months has meant saying no to some things that I know could make a difference. And that's really hard for me as a person who is pretty achievement oriented. And also I can see where the gaps are in my community and I know exactly what it would take to fix them. And I don't want to have diabetes. I would like to be around to have kids and grandchildren. You know what I mean? Those things are also true. And so like if I was talking to myself at like 23, 24, especially when I was a frontline worker, like I really would have said, I know it's hard, but you have to choose you sometimes too.
Mhm.
Because if the situation was reversed, would you let your young person be going through this? Would you let your young person work 80 hours a week and not care for themselves? Now I have young people that I work with like that. And if I played back the phone calls that I have with them to myself, could I take accountability and do the same? Is really the questions that I sit with.
Such a profound answer. That was spot on. The question that goes hand in hand with that is, and you don't have to answer this. So,
Sure.
how do you manage the, and I'm making an assumption, but just based off our conversation, I know it to be true, the guilt that comes with when a young person is lost and you feel like there was something else you should have, could have, would have done if you had the opportunity?
Yeah, I'm going to trust myself and answer this pretty vulnerably, honestly. I had a young person and I had started working with her when I started my youth work journey almost 10 years ago. And she had a baby when she was 17 and she just rose to the occasion and was an awesome mom and got a job working in a daycare so she'd have childcare, was able to get into an apartment. We were so proud of what she was able to do. And a couple years ago, she got addicted to fentanyl And it was clear to us that she couldn't be a mom anymore. Nobody in her family was willing to take her daughter. But we were put in this position where I was like, okay, what is our next step? I don't feel like I'm in a position to take a child in. If this situation was my own family, I don't know if I would be in a position to do that. There are things that I want to do in my life that will be challenging if we were to take a child in. Ultimately, we decided that we could take her in for a short period of time to get the mom help and get her into treatment. And we were able to do that. And since then, she's kind of gone ghost. It's been hard to keep tabs on where she's at. But I sit with the thought of this little person being trapped in a cycle of trauma that her mom was in. I watched the exact same thing play out. Youth workers, if you've been doing this for more than 10 years, you watch the cycles happen because it's systemic, right? And it's hard for me to sit with. Like when I think about her, when I think about her daughter, it brings me a lot of grief. Like I'm heartbroken. And she's still alive from what I know, but it feels like a death when somebody's going through that. I sit with a lot of grief and I hold space for that. But I'm a pretty spiritual person and I have a connection to God. And I worked in ministry for about 7 years of my career. I remember a lot of the time that I was in ministry, I would hold an absolute grief. When that 12-year-old got pregnant by her pimp, I was so grief-stricken, Jonathan, that there was nothing I could do. It was absolutely heartbreaking to me. At the same time, I had to be able to hold the truth of, like, I get to still have life in me, right? Like, there is still a life to be lived, and I can hold space, and I can love, and I can pray, and I can tap into kind of all of those spiritual resources that are at my disposal, while knowing that grief is a really powerfully spiritual act. And there's a whole book in the Bible called Lamentations. That is a message to us that grief is not something to be thrown on the back burner. It's something for us to sit with. That's how I manage now, to know that I cannot save every young person. When I see a news headline, whether it's in my city or another city, I allow myself to be grieved by it. But I also allow myself to find joy. It's a hard thing to navigate. But as a Black person, if there's one thing that my ancestors taught me to do is that you can do both.
Absolutely.
And so I think about the descendant that I am comes from a people that were born enslaved and died enslaved and still managed to sing songs of joy, still managed to sing songs of celebration, still managed to love one another. So if they can do that, I can do this.
I'll say.
Yeah.
At the risk of, I don't know, what you just said was so dope. I think that we conflate grief and grieving. Grief is an emotion that is natural and it has a space, it has a place, right? And grieving is a natural process to process that emotion, recognizing it, not ignoring it, not burying it, not suppressing it, but saying, I am missing something right now. I am aware of it. There is an emotional, maybe in a physiological impact of missing that person, that experience, the potential, all of the things that are lost through the losses, and then being able to move forward, not move on, but move forward.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm really glad that you shared that because that just gave me almost an awakening of another understanding around grief and grieving.
Absolutely. And there's nothing more disarming than grief too, right? Because when you can't save the person, there's a realization that God has got it, I'm not. Or whoever your higher power is, or however you see the things in the world. You feel a bit like a superhero when you're doing this frontline work. It's the truth. And not out of ego, but because you're like, okay, I have the resources, let me get them to the person, and then they'll be safe, right? That's how our brains work. And so when you experience a point where the method isn't matching, like you didn't work, or you didn't get there in time, or you decided to celebrate your son's birthday instead of going out and getting that kid, like that decision, the outcome was going to happen regardless, right? You have to trust that that's the path that was meant to happen, and you're not God.
Yeah.
So that means that you can't do it all.
Yeah.
You're not a superhero. And that's hard to sit with too. I think there's some grieving that happens in that as well.
Oh, absolutely. There have been two losses in my life in this work that have defined who I am and how I show up in these spaces. The first one was when I first got involved in this work. I didn't know shit. Just quite honestly, I didn't know shit. I had one foot in, one foot out. I happened to have a job working for an organization that worked with gays, got called to a situation, met a young man, developed a relationship with him. I wasn't doing anything to change the trajectory of his life other than being that caring, trusted adult consistently in his life, right? I was, again, like your age when you got into this work. I was like
Yep.
21, 22.
Totally.
Didn't know shit.
Barely out of the window.
I mean, literally, I had one foot in, one foot out, right? I was riding it. And he ended up getting killed shortly after my relationship started with him. There probably was nothing in the world that I could have done, but you could not have told my young, dumb ass that back then. And I spiraled. I went through what in behavior change. I relapsed in that one foot in, one foot out. Both feet were back in.
Right.
Within a matter of a few years, I was in prison.
Yeah.
Luckily, I was in prison because the way I was living my life at that time, I easily could have been killed. The shit I was doing was stupid. I was fortunate enough to reflect and say, there probably wasn't anything I could have done to change what happened, but I have a lot more to learn to do this work effectively. That started a path for me learning how to do this work, like motivational interviewing and understanding the stages of change, adding to my toolkit of showing up with the credibility of being in the life. But now I have also the toolkits of a social worker. So there's that. And
Absolutely.
then the other instance was I had a young man who I became very, very close to when I was doing direct services. He was shot and killed the day after Christmas in 2019. And I took it really hard because I poured everything that I could into him. Not only me, but I connected him with other organizations and other people who also poured into him. And he literally had the village wrapped around him, right? There were so many touch points of, and I started that self-destructive conversation of, well, I could have did more. And then that lasted for probably maybe 20 minutes because I knew that I did everything that I could have. It wasn't anybody's fault, right?
Right.
It just
Yeah.
was one of those situations that
Totally.
just was fucked up, right? Don't know where I was going with those stories.
No, I think, well, first of all, I'm really sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
Those are really heavy, especially with the investment, right? Really hard to hold. And one thing I'm observing in that story too is that we have to, as youth workers, really challenge the concept of what we could have done,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because if you say what you could have done was save them if you had done X, Y, and Z, well, the truth is what you could have done ended with wherever you decided was your boundary, right? And boundaries are so important for nourishing who we are, right? So, like,
Boundaries are
if you're
self-care.
absolutely, and so if you decide, I'm not going to take any more phone calls on Saturdays after 6 because I need to be with my wife, right? Like, that is core to what I need to take care of myself and my family. And so the could stops at 6 o'clock on Saturday. So there was nothing that you could have done after 6 o'clock on Saturday because that's where your boundary was. So I think my encouragement to folks is figure out where you want your boundaries to be and stop there.
Absolutely. Could and should, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's how you fill your cup up. That's how you have something to give, right? And truthfully, I do know that a lot of our frontline workers, like, this work is part of their self-care, right? I worked
Yes.
with a guy who came out of the life and he was busying himself 20 hours a day, it felt like, because that's what he needed to do to stay in the straight and narrow, right? Like, that's what he needed. And my encouragement to folks is if that's what's helpful for you, do it and know that there are other ways, right? So you can still pack your day full if that's what you need to do to take care of yourself. But maybe you add in some other things in there like meditation. Maybe you add in spending some time with a loved one that feels safe and secure to you. Or like maybe you spend some of that time cooking or adding in hobbies and other recreation that helps support your overall mental. Because if it's always high stakes for 20 hours a day, That's not good for our body. And we don't have time to get into it, but go look up cortisol. It's very destructive. You do not need to be in that place 24 hours a day.
Oh my God.
Well, you need a whole self-care episode.
Yeah. Okay, Rachel, everything you have said has just been so insightful. And with what we've been talking about, with like the understanding that sometimes losses is a part of the work, understanding that, we're not always going to see wins. Quite honestly, we may see more losses than wins. Not saying the wins don't exist, but we see the losses. We feel the losses. It feels discouraging. It feels like we're on a hamster wheel or a treadmill. It just feels like the work keep coming. It's hard to see that we're actually making change. But I know we are. I trust we are. I have faith that we are.
Absolutely.
So my question to you is, what's one change you believe is possible in our lifetime if we really trust young people to lead it?
I'm going to use some of the wins and losses terminology. I'm a baller, so I'm going to take it to basketball a little bit. In this work, it can feel like, because we're up against systems as an NBA level team, and we're trying to build up the NBA level, right? But those systems have been around for generations, right? Like, we're up against a league that's been built to destroy us. And so those losses to the system can feel really painful, right? Because we want to be at that level where we can start to dismantle and break down the parts of the system that are damaging and destroying our communities. Mm. So when we get a win against the Globetrotters or G League team, it can feel not as gratifying because the losses feel so big, but they're still wins. And it's still about sharpening up your skill. When we see a reduction in the overall losses experienced in a particular community or jurisdiction, when you're able to get that kid to go to school instead of being on the street that week, like, those are wins. They're against a smaller opponent, but they're still a win. And so I think those will continue to build up when we have the right people on our team. And so we talked a little bit about the ecosystem at the beginning of this, but like, our bench could be real deep. It could be system level deep if we have the right people on the bench. And the right people is folks from all these different sectors for sure. But truly the best people that we have are the young folks, because they know the game better than anybody else. And so I say that to say, in our lifetime, we could see some phenomenal systems change when young people are at the center of what we are using to design our strategies, our approach, and our policies, right? Because I don't know if you've experienced this, Jonathan, but this crop of young people that I'm encountering, because I don't know if it's because of technology or what, but they have more access and understanding of what's going on in the systems around them than I ever did at 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. And so knowing that, we have to plug them in sooner, right? Because they could really be helping us and create much broader impact and quicker. And that's going to be exceptionally important as culture continues to change at a rapid rate. And so what I'm noticing in my profession is that, for example, slang changes every 2 weeks now with TikTok. That seems like a small thing, but it's true across the board. Violence is something that started with beef at party in a community at one point and is now starting on Facebook or Twitter or what have you, right? And it's going to be something else in a year, right? And so we have to have young people at the table strategically to not only address violence today, but also create strategies that are going to help us recover and also build systems and programs and policy that's going to benefit us in the next generation.
Great answer. Great answer. I especially appreciate the analogy of building out the bench and the contributions of the younger players on the bench, right?
Look, everybody wants Wemby. How old is he? You know what I'm saying? Like, we need the young folks. We do. They're putting in reps that we weren't putting in. I was working with middle school students who were writing letters to Congress and writing note cards to get people to get out the vote. They can't even vote, and they know that folks need to get out the vote.
Right.
That's a different they're starting way earlier than we ever did. And so we need them desperately.
This has been such a good, fun conversation. I feel reinvigorated. This has been a hard week. The recording of this episode, I'm going to do my best to get this out next week for Youth Violence Prevention Week. But it's been a challenging week, and I honestly feel reinvigorated on a
Mm,
Saturday afternoon. Thank you for coming on
absolutely.
the show, sharing all of your wisdom, insights, perspectives, energy, and personality. This has been really dope. I want to segue. The show is called The Incredible Messenger, and I attempt to bring people on the show who have a message to share with whoever the audience is. I believe that the guests we select are of value. And so, with that, Rachel, although you've already done almost 2 hours of dropping gems of wisdom and knowledge, is there a message that you want to share with the audience before we go?
First of all, thank you so much for the invitation. This was really fun. And I always love talking about young people. I think they're amazing. I would just like to close us out with an encouragement to folks listening that might feel discouraged from this week's news from the Fed. Number one, we're fighters. We're not backing down without a fight. We've done more with less. And if you're a Black person listening, it's built into our DNA to do more with less. So don't be discouraged. We're going to push through this time for sure.
I love it. Thank you for sharing
Mhm.
that. If you made it this far into the episode, that demonstrates that this was a valuable use of your time, and I appreciate you sharing some of that with me. I would love to ask you if this episode gave you something to think about or something for you to move on in your youth leadership, or how your program, your policies support youth leadership. Please share it, save it. Let me know in the comments if you've learned something or what you learned, what was most valuable on the show. Please share it in a comment, because those conversations are what keep this movement honest, keeps it grounded and growing. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the show. Leave a rating. If you listen on Spotify or Apple, a rating would make my day, and write a quick review. With all that said, man, I appreciate y'all. Thank you. Until the next time, peace.